Baseball is dead.
Rest in peace.
Okay, we are now joined by Bob Kendrick, the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. I believe at this point you were a three-time guest, which we haven't done this. We haven't done this recently, but I believe, Dallas, correct me if I'm wrong. If you are on the podcast, do you have a dog, Mr. Kendrick, by any chance?
You know, I don't. I do not.
So we have this thing on this show where if you've been on the podcast 3 times, you're eligible for the Baseball is Dead dog calendar. So there's a bunch of players that have dogs, and we want to someday put together a dog calendar. So if you, by any chance, decide to adopt a furry friend, you're going to have to let us know because they'll be eligible for the dog calendar after this.
I will absolutely do that.
Okay, perfect. The World Baseball Classic is just 9 days away. We are recording on February 23rd, this Monday, this blizzardy Monday in Boston, but I guess it's a perfect 81-degree day for Dallas out on the West Coast. So I was told that the World Baseball Classic was heavily influenced by the Negro Leagues, and I didn't want to dive into that story. I wanted to hear it straight from you. What is the connection between the two?
Well, I oftentimes tout, Jared, the fact that our game is a global game due in large part to the Negro Leagues. Now, most baseball fans don't know this, and that's part of why this museum is so important. But you go back and you look at the Negro Leaguers as trailblazing in terms of taking baseball into Canada. We were oftentimes the first Americans to play in many Spanish-speaking countries. And it was indeed a touring team of Negro Leaguers that would introduce the American brand of professional baseball to the Japanese, going all the way back to 1927. Guys, that's 7 years before Babe Ruth and his All-Americans would go to Japan. They go in 1934. Now, they've been commonly credited with having taken the American brand of professional baseball to the Japanese, but it's not true. It was a team called the Philadelphia Royal Giants, a barnstorming group of Negro Leaguers who would go to Japan, play a 24-game exhibition series. They go 23-0-1 on that tour. The tour was so successful that 7 years later, Ruth and his All-Americans would get that invitation to make that trek over to Japan. And I oftentimes preface that with my visitors because I don't have to even tell you guys, you already know this. There are so many ethnicities that make up a major league roster on any given day. But at the heart of it, it was indeed the Negro Leagues. Again, they helped make this game the global game that it is. They just simply were never given credit for it. And to be honest, guys, the Negro Leagues did not care what color you were. All they cared was, can you play? And if you can play, you can play. And if you were to talk to the older Japanese baseball historians, they will tell you that it was that tour of the Negro Leagues in 1927, and then a subsequent tour in 1931, that really was the spark that lit the flame that is now the fire for professional baseball in Japan. Yeah, the Japanese have been playing professional baseball, but they hadn't seen this brand of professional baseball. Yeah. And they call those Negro League players, fellas, gentle giants. Because they towered over their Asian counterparts. You've seen the images, you've seen them, Dallas, the photograph that we have.
Yep.
You know, the disparity in size is what is so striking. It was almost like they were playing their little brothers.
Yes.
But the Negro Leaguers didn't go over and try to beat them as bad as they could. They taught them the game because, as you guys know, Japan is a country whose culture is predicated around respect. So they didn't go over and make a mockery of the tour. They were very respectful, taught them the game, and as a result, the Japanese players and their fans just fell in love with these Negro League players. And it certainly plays a role in why we were able to get great professional Japanese stars like Hideo Nomo, Ichiro Suzuki, Yamamoto now, and of course, this phenom by the name of Shohei Ohtani. Yeah, and so the Negro Leagues played a great role in making this game global, and which is why I get so excited every 3 years when the WBC comes about.
I love that. Were there any notable names, like any names that we would recognize that were on that first trip to Japan from the Negro Leagues?
Man. Oh, the great Raleigh Biz Mackey, who, if you play MLB The Show, he is one of the Negro League players in the video game.
Yep.
Well, Biz Mackey was a great catcher. He played multiple positions, but was primarily a great catcher. Raleigh Biz Mackey would take a young Roy Campanella under his wings and taught him the art of catching. See, Campy joins the Negro Leagues, believe it or not, fellas, as a 15-year-old catcher. If you can imagine, as a 15-year-old kid catching professionally in professional baseball. But as I share with my visitors, he was not your typical 15-year-old. He was a 15-year-old man-child, but he was 15 nevertheless. And Raleigh Biz Mackey takes him under his wing. Campy joins a team called the Baltimore Elite Giants. Now, it's spelled elite, but it's pronounced elite. Yeah, okay. You make those Negro Leaguers mad if you call them the Elite Giants. They were the Elite Giants. Biz Mackey takes him under his wing, taught him the art of catching, and as you guys well know, Roy Campanella would become a 3-time MVP with the Brooklyn Dodgers before a tragic car accident cut short what was still a Hall of Fame career. And if Campy was alive today, he would tell you the greatest defensive catcher this sport has ever seen was Raleigh Biz Mackey. Andy Cooper, also in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, was on that Philadelphia Royal Giant team of 1927.
I am enthralled every time you open your mouth and start to speak about the history of the game from a perspective that a lot of people just unfortunately have never gotten to take in. And Jared and I were talking about this before you came on, Mr. Kendrick, and he asked me, he said, do you remember the message I read you about the connection between the Negro Leagues and the WBC? And I thought to myself, I don't remember a specific moment, or I don't remember necessarily hearing you speak to me at any point in time during the conversations we've had about a specific moment. But I mean, 2 minutes before you came on, it just kind of dawned on me. And I said to Jared, well, I mean, think about how many Latin American players played in the Negro Leagues. Yes. Think about the Canadians, as you pointed out. Think about going to Japan. So then it started to sink in, like, it's not necessarily a singular moment. Yeah. It was the complete and total involvement and everybody's inclusion in the Negro Leagues that really has laid the foundation for, as you call it, and as we understand it, to be a global game. And now it's a meeting of these global teams in the WBC. What sort of, because I mean, you beam with pride each and every day, but when you started to see this WBC develop and evolve, what sort of sense of pride did you start to feel internally, knowing, because you are the keeper of one of the greatest moments, one of the greatest tenures and evolutions of the game of baseball, and that has to feel a certain way, some kind of way in your heart.
Oh, no question. And that's why I think I enjoy the WBC so much, because it's good for us in this country to see how much other countries love baseball. Because sometimes we think that we're the only ones that love baseball. And then you go to those games, particularly when those teams from Latin America, man, you go to those games and it is a party in the stands.
Yes, sir.
They hooping and hollering and just having a great time. And for me, Dallas, it absolutely fills my heart with joy and tremendous pride to know how important the Negro Leagues role is, because when they went to those countries, as you guys well know, they were treated like heroes.
Yes.
So now they're going to stay in the finest hotels, eat in the finest restaurants. And then, of course, when they came back home, they were treated like second-class citizens. And so it created a brotherhood, particularly between the Negro Leagues and Spanish-speaking countries, that was essentially bonded by baseball. And we actually have a traveling exhibition and a digital exhibition called Negro Leagues Baseball, the Spanish spelling of the word baseball, because we wanted this connection to be brought to the forefront. You know, the great Willard Brown, Willard Brown was a Hall of Fame outfielder for the Kansas City Monarchs. Josh Gibson nicknamed him Home Run Brown. Now, if Gibson nicknamed you Home Run, then you got some power.
Sure.
And Willard Brown was a sensational five-tool player who is in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. But we have his Puerto Rican Hall of Fame plaque on display here at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And in Puerto Rico, he was as beloved as their native son, Roberto Clemente, particularly by the older Puerto Rican baseball fan, where in Puerto Rico, Willard Brown won the Triple Crown twice. His Puerto Rican Winter League home run record of 27 in 60 games still stands to this day. And in Puerto Rico, his nickname was Ese Hombre, that man. The fans would start chanting when he came to the plate, Ese Hombre, Ese Hombre. And of course, I guess today all the kids say, I'm him. I'm her. But back then it was Ese Hombre, that man. Yeah, no, Willard Brown is just one of so many. And of course, in this country, we were treated to sing the great Martin de Higo, who hailed from Cuba. And Dallas, if you recall, he's standing on the field, he's batting on the field. His nickname was El Maestro, the master, because he could do it all.
Do it all.
Played all 9 positions, played all 9 of them well. He is the only baseball player in the history of our sport to be enshrined into 5 different countries' baseball halls of fame. He's in the Mexican, Cuban, Venezuelan, Dominican, and in Cooperstown. Yeah, tremendous ball player. And so that kind of, I guess you could say, cross-pollination of cultures was a big part of the Negro League story. And the WBC, to me, brings that and gives us certainly an opportunity to talk about that. But again, to see how much other fans from around the globe enjoy this game.
When you talk about the story of the Negro Leagues, it continues because the Indianapolis Clowns have been revived, and I've been following the Savannah Bananas for quite some time. Jesse Cole, he's awesome. Got to meet him a few times. His love for, like, people kind of, like, I think misperceive his intentions, where it's like he's trying to compete with baseball. Like, no, he's trying to create passion for the sport with, like, the younger fans, and he does it better than maybe anyone ever has. So I was kind of curious what the behind the scenes was on the revival of the Indianapolis Clowns, and how you came to have, like, this. I'm assuming it's a partnership. I'm assuming he did this with your blessing. How did that come to be, and why the Clowns as the one Negro League team that did get selected, and how cool, I know I'm asking a bunch of questions, and how cool was it that Jackie Bradley Jr., who, again, I'm a huge Boston Red Sox fan, how cool is it that he was the first pick for the Clowns revival?
Well, I wish I could tell you that it was my idea, and I guess I could tell you that it was my idea, but I'd be lying to you. No, Jesse came to me with the idea. We own the trademarks to the Indianapolis Clowns. And he had this epiphany, and I think it started to percolate for him several years prior, when the Bananas came here to the museum, and I had the opportunity to take them on a tour of the museum. And Dallas, you might recall, there's a section in the museum that's dedicated to the clown teams.
Yes, sir.
There were several iterations of the Clowns, but the Indianapolis Clowns really were the only one that was a part of the professional Negro Leagues. Well, the Clowns were doing what the Bananas are doing in the 1930s and 40s, this whole notion of baseball and entertainment. Now, I think the Negro Leagues recognized this at a level far higher than Major League Baseball did. You know, the Negro Leagues always knew that this game was entertaining. And it didn't mean that you weren't going to see great, fundamentally sound baseball, but you were going to be thoroughly entertained. They were going to put on a show. And as my friend Buck O'Neill would say, you couldn't go to the concession stand because you might miss something that you ain't never seen before. But the Indianapolis Clowns took this to a whole nother level of baseball and entertainment. And great stars, however, because I don't want to sell the Clowns short of just being this entertainment, genre. We're talking about players like Henry Aaron, who began his career with the Indianapolis Clowns. Now, he didn't do the entertaining stuff. He was a regular part of the team. They had designated guys that did the entertainment, unlike the Bananas, where pretty much all of those guys are part of the entertainment aspect. But they would have a couple of guys who would be designated to do the entertainment. Henry Aaron joins the Clowns as an 18-year-old skinny, cross-handed hitting shortstop. So he was a right-hand hitter hitting with his left hand on top. And of course, that's unorthodox. It fears you break your wrist hitting in that manner. Henry Aaron was knocking the cover off the baseball in a highly unorthodox fashion. The great Sam Hairston starred for the Indianapolis Clowns. And of course, you guys know his grandsons, Jerry Hairston Jr., Scott Hairston. Those are his grandsons. And they come from about 4 generations of professional Hairston baseball players. Sam Hairston was the last player in the Negro Leagues to win the Triple Crown. So they had legitimate talent filling up ballparks. But they also had guys like the legendary Reese Goose Tatum, who was a star for the Harlem Globetrotters. And that's where most people know that name from. I had the opportunity to take the legendary Oscar Robertson on a tour of the museum, the Big O. And the Big O had played basketball against Goose, but he never knew that Goose had played in the Negro Leagues. And Goose was a slick fielding first baseman for the Indianapolis Clowns. And Jared, he had the longest arms I've ever seen on a human being. Goose was about 6'3", maybe 6'4", but he had an 84-inch wingspan. So his arms were literally down below his knees.
Yeah.
And he was so long and gangly that he could just walk out on the field and do nothing, and the crowd would erupt into laughter. But as we say, he was loose as a goose. But he could pick it at first base, and people flocked to those games. They were owned and promoted by the same guys that had the Harlem Globetrotters, Abe Saperstein and Sidney Pollack. And so while they were somewhat controversial, because some within the African-American community thought that they were maybe playing up to a stereotypical depiction of the black players, but they were highly popular within the African-American community. They were filling up ballparks and they could flat out play. And so it only made sense, really, that they would pay homage to the team that really was the inspiration for what we see the Bananas doing now. And of course, to have Jackie be our first draft pick. I was in Savannah back in October when we made the announcement, and to see people in the stands were moved to tears to know that Jesse and the folks over at the Bananas were going to pay honor to the Negro Leagues by bringing back the Indianapolis Clowns. And I can't think of a better guy to be our first draft pick than Jackie Bradley Jr., who's been in this museum on any number of occasions. And we got a chance to spend a little time when he was briefly playing for the Kansas City Royals before he finally hung it up. And so he and I traded messages the minute that I heard that he was the Clowns' top draft pick. And we've been trading messages back and forth since. And they played 2 games here in Kansas City, May 30th and 31st, the Clowns versus the Savannah Bananas. Both games are sold out already.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, both games sold out. No so doubt. I know all these folks who know me, they go call me looking for tickets. No, don't call me.
Can't help you. Can't help you. Now, Mr. Kendrick, the Clowns, I mean, you mentioned Henry Aaron. And I mean, that was the first team he broke in with, correct? Yes. That was the first team he broke in with. So at 15, 16 years old, that's where Hank is playing. But they were also extremely forward thinking, not only from an entertainment perspective, but correct me if I'm wrong, aren't they the ones that employed Tony Stone? Correct? Yes. And Mammy Peanut, right? Yes. So it wasn't just about the entertainment source, and because Tony and Mammy, I mean, they both could get it. They both were not, I mean, they were not hood ornaments. Yeah, they both could get it.
All 3 women, Dallas, Tony Stone was the first. She joined the Clowns in 1953. So when the Boston Braves, Jared, signed Henry Aaron away from the Clowns, Henry only played with the Clowns for almost about 3 months. And he was plucked away by the Boston Braves, who, of course, we know became the Milwaukee Braves, who will become the Atlanta Braves. Well, when the Boston Braves signed him in 1952, in 1953, the Indianapolis Clowns hired Tony Stone. They would then bring, of course, Mamie Peanut Johnson, who was a 5'3" pitcher with a strong right arm. Yeah, and Connie Morgan, who hailed from Philadelphia. All three women were tremendously gifted athletes, and they could play. And they got an opportunity to fulfill their dream of competing with and against the men in the Negro Leagues. And it all came through the Indianapolis Clowns. Now, this was at a time when the Negro Leagues were starting to lose its primary male fan base because we had moved over to Major League Baseball. And as you guys can well imagine, there was a natural curiosity within the African-American population to see how those great black stars from the Negro Leagues were going to fare now that integration had occurred. And so as that star talent from the Negro League started to transition into Major League Baseball, the black fan base followed them over to Major League Baseball. And I think the Clowns were looking for an added way to add a little spark to their attendance. Now, this doesn't diminish the athleticism of those three women because they could play. But they were looking to try and tap into a new clientele, and they did just that. They were able to attract a fan base who came out to see Tony and Connie and Mamie play. And it took a little bit for the men to accept them because it was so new. You know, anytime you get introduced to something new is always a little bit fearful. But once the women proved that they belong, that was the end of that. And I got to know Mamie Peanut Johnson really well. I didn't know Tony and Connie. They had both passed away before I got involved with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. But I had the esteemed honor of speaking at Mamie Johnson's funeral services in 2017. And guys, she was so proud of what she had done. And she talked about how well she was treated by the fellas. You know, because again, once you prove you belong, that's it. Mm-hmm. That's all that matters. Can you play? And once they proved they could play, then any hostility that might have been there, it was gone. And the fans flocked to see those ladies play.
That's awesome. I never knew that.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's why I always go back. Like, if you play MLB The Show, if you've ever been curious about picking up a baseball video game, it is the time. There's never been a better time because there is, I mean, that portion of the game is, I mean, it is like walking into the museum almost, because you get snippets from Mr. Kendrick telling these stories, giving you these insights to the background of each and every one of these players and the impact that they've had. It's one of my favorite parts of the game. It's the reason that I will continue to buy the game as long as they continue to offer this. I want to know, have you had, will you have have you had a hand in whether it's some of the things that you would like to see from the team in terms of an entertainment perspective, maybe things that you were privy to that they did back in the day that maybe we are not seeing from the Bananas or the Party Animals and some of the other teams in Banana Ball. And did you have, I mean, this is a selfish question. Are you going to be selling the unis? Are you going to be selling the unis at the museum, Mr. Kendrick?
Yes, because absolutely, because the unis are sweet.
Yes.
They are sweet. Now, they did a great job with modernizing, but still staying true to the tradition of the history of the Clowns. And Jesse, who is absolutely brilliant. And I've gotten to know him through the years. And to me, he is a modern day Bill Veeck. Bill Veeck was oftentimes looked at as somewhat kind of aloof, and people didn't fully understand it, but Bill Veeck was brilliant. And Jesse is absolutely brilliant with what he has done by attracting an audience to this game built around baseball and entertainment. And so while I don't really have a lot of say in the matter, I can tell you now they're working on routines and these antics. And one of the young guys who was going to pitch for the Clowns, he was going to school at a college in Kansas, and he and his father was getting ready to drive down to Savannah, and they stopped in at the museum, and I got to spend some time with him. And guys, he was so excited about this opportunity to play baseball at the professional level, but play this brand of baseball that the Clowns are going to bring to the forefront. The Bananas have been doing a lot of that, and you mentioned some of the other teams that are part of the Banana Ball League. And of course, my good friend Ryan Howard is the celebrity manager of the Clowns. So when they play in certain venues, particularly Major League stadiums, Ryan is going to be there. Shane Victorino is with the local team. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So one more question that I had, Jared, just because you brought up Bill Veeck. Do you see any parallels? Do you see any similarities between the great Rube Foster and Jesse and the effort to continue to push forward, the ability to organize, and I think the ability to make an impact maybe where others didn't see the opportunity to make an impact?
Yeah, there's no question, because this innovativeness that Jesse has displayed and continues, Rube Foster was that.
Yeah.
Rube Foster was so far ahead of his time when he organized the Negro Leagues here in Kansas City. I've always said that he was the most brilliant mind in baseball history. And he's highly unappreciated because people just don't know.
Sure.
And it's obviously the museum job to help them know. Yes, absolutely. And because he was just that far ahead of his time. And Rube thought that he created a league that was so dynamic that it would force Major League Baseball's hand to expand. So if you think what we saw with the merger of the NFL and the AFL, which is how we got the Kansas City Chiefs here in Kansas City, or the merger of the NBA and the ABA for you basketball fans. So when you see teams like the San Antonio Spurs, the Denver Nuggets, the Indiana Pacers, they were the New Jersey Nets at one point in time. Of course, now they're the Brooklyn Nets. These teams all came out of the merger of the NBA and the ABA. And so Rube Foster was thinking that in 1920, and he was almost right. Instead, Major League Baseball siphoned that talent off the field. But Rube was thinking that, okay, for example, you take 4 of the original 8 Negro League teams, and then you take the other 4 top talent and disperse them amongst the 4 that would move in to Major League Baseball. And you would have had something special. And Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis was never going to allow this to happen. No, this wasn't going to happen. And the owners of Major League Baseball weren't going to open up the table for those black teams to come in. But Foster was almost right. And I see that same visionary in Jesse. He found a niche. He found a place that I think is developing baseball fans. It's not there to replace what we see at the major league level. This is something that is a special addition to this game. And if you ever been to one of those games, fellas, I mean, everybody's having a good time. The kids are out there. They're just loving every second. You can't take your eyes off the field. Again, as Buck would say, you might miss something that you ain't never seen before. So I don't know how concession sales does for them, because you don't nobody going to the concession stand.
That's true. That's the difference. Like, people aren't going for the concessions, but people get there. Like, if the game's at 7 o'clock, people get there at like 1 p.m. because they do a parade. The merch lines are around the entire stadium. Like, they clean up on merch. I have 2 questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Dallas brought up MLB The Show and how, I mean, that was a gateway to, I think, a lot of young baseball fans. That was their introduction to the Negro Leagues. Do you think that the Indianapolis Clowns being in Banana Ball could be an even greater gateway to young baseball fans discovering the Negro Leagues and then seeking out more information, because they're like, oh, like this, wait a second. So the Clowns aren't just a Banana Ball team. Like, they existed before this, and then they start asking questions. Then they go down the wormhole. Do you think their inclusion in Banana Ball could have a greater impact than even MLB The Show did.
I don't know, Jared, if it will have a greater impact. That's just because, I tell you guys, I was somewhat naive because I didn't realize how big the gaming platform really is. And it's worldwide. It is global. But to put it in perspective, man, the Bananas are going to play in front of over 3 million fans this season. They're selling out football stadiums for these games. And when I went to Savannah in October for the announcement, and this was just the announcement, it was a made-for-TV ESPN2 event, and the stadium was full just for the announcement. There was no game, there was nothing else going on, and the energy level there, what they've done in building that brand and being able to add on to that brand is absolutely incredible. So there is no doubt. It is already having an impact, just with all the social media stuff that they're doing in and around the club. It has naturally opened up, I think, curiosity, which leads to, I hope, understanding, and then ultimately an appreciation for the history of the Negro Leagues, because you're not just going to learn about the Indianapolis Clowns. I think it will pique their interest in wanting to know more about the history of the Negro Leagues. So both of those unique tools are bringing fans to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And it's at a time where we are on the verge of building a new Negro Leagues Museum campus. So I can't think of a better time to have this heightened interest in the subject matter with all the ambitious plans that we have here in Kansas City. We just unveiled the renderings for what this new Negro Leagues Museum campus is going to look like on February 13th, which was the actual 106th anniversary of the birth of the Negro Leagues, which includes the restoration of the Paseo YMCA, where the leagues were formed. That will become the Buck O'Neill Education and Research Center, a new 35,000+ square foot Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. The current museum is 10,000 square feet. So we're talking about 3 times plus the size of our current home. And we also announced plans for there to be a Marriott tribute hotel called the Pennant that will be built right into the new Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, creating the nation's first Negro Leagues campus as the gateway into historic 18th and Vine and an international headquarters for both Black baseball and social history. So this heightened interest in Negro Leagues history has really put us on the cusp of creating this wonderful expansion, because Negro Leagues baseball history is as hot right now as it has ever been. And we need to ride that wave of momentum as we look at positioning this museum for its long-term future and sustainability. And so having a partnership like we do with MLB The Show, and this was a 5-year partnership. This is the 4th season that will be when the game is released later in March. We have 1 more year contractually. And I'm hoping that we can extend it, because there's still a lot of players that we would love to bring forth in this game. And what I love, fellas, as much attention as the Negro Leagues has gotten in this game, I get just as excited about the fact that we have won a number of educational awards for how we're using a video game to teach history.
Yes.
And that just warms my heart, man. And I'll get juice when the kids come into the museum, Dallas, and they want to show me how Satchel Paige did his double pump wind up. They want to do the high leg kick like Satchel, and they want to throw the B-ball like Satchel threw the B-ball.
Well, Mr. Kendrick, I know I speak for Jared. I know I speak for Jay when I tell you, and I mean, you have heard this, and if you haven't heard this, that would be a crime. But I know somewhere in your heart, you understand the role that you play in not only the education of young fans who were not privy to even the existence of the Negro Leagues, and are now understanding and appreciating players that paved the way for some of their favorite players today to play the game. And I can say unequivocally, and this is where I know they'll agree with me, this This doesn't happen without you, sir. This does not happen without you being that gateway, without you being the portal to the past that you are. I am truly humbled every time you choose to spend time with us. I take advantage of every trip we make to Kansas City to come by and say hello to you, because of how much I respect what you have continued to give the game of baseball, who at one point in time did not want to have anything to do with individuals like you and the predecessors. And I would be remiss to not just acknowledge that none of this happens without an individual like you. So I just want to say thank you again for everything that you do, for the way that you explain the game, for the insight that you offer us, for the stories that you tell, the way you peel back layers of not only individuals, but organizations, the way you contextualize their place in history. It is so important, and it's no wonder that you're winning educational awards for those reasons alone, because it matters. The game is the game, but understanding where the game of baseball and where the Negro Leagues fit in to our society as a whole, I think is a completely different ball game, pun intended. And you, sir, just absolutely continue to knock it out of the park. So congratulations on all of this.
I appreciate that, man. It is such a tremendous honor to be a steward of this story and to have essentially taken the baton, which was handed over to me by the late, great Buck O'Neil, who was my mentor, my confidant, one of my very best friends. And, everything that we do it to keep the legacy of those who are no longer here, to keep their legacy alive. And when I met Buck Dallas for the very first time, one of the first questions I posed to him was, what motivated you to want to build a Negro Leagues baseball museum? And his answer was succinct, but also very poignant, so that we would be remembered. He did not want them to be forgotten, not for just what they gave the game of baseball, but what they gave this country. And that has been kind of at the forefront of my existence. Now it's hard to believe, man, for the last 33 years of involvement with this museum, is to make sure that they won't be forgotten and that their legacies will continue to play on and help people understand what they gave this game, what they gave this country, but also to use their life lessons as a tool of hope and inspiration for future generations that are coming, who will experience this. And so it's very humbling, but I'm also obviously very proud to be, like I said, just play a role in this and keeping this history alive.
What do you think? What do you think Buck would say about this, knowing that the Clowns are now a part of growing the game in a different aspect? What would, candidly, between you and him, it's you two just enjoying a nice dinner together. After dinner, you look to him and you say, Buck, look what we've done. What would he say to you?
When I first came on board as staff here at the Negro Leagues Museum, this was back in 1998 when I became the museum's first director of marketing. And the only thing that I have signed by Buck for all these years that we hung out, because it wasn't about the autographs, it was just the experience that I had and the memories that I had. But the only thing I have signed is the hardback copy of his book, I Was Right on Time. And he signed it to the Money Man. And that was...
I love it.
But to sit down with him and to see how he would feel about this reverence that the Negro Leagues are getting, that he didn't want them to be forgotten, and they're being remembered in ways in which I don't think any of the Negro League players would have ever even imagined. Because for them, they were just playing baseball. It was nothing special. They were just playing baseball. They loved baseball, and they were fortunate to make their living playing baseball. But I think all of them would kind of tip their cap to what we've been able to do here at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And like I said, I feel very fortunate and blessed to be a part of that success story. We still got a lot of work to do. There's no time to rest on your laurels, in this business, man, because it's always, what have you done for me lately? And I got to get out there and raise about $45 million to build this new campus. And then once we get that campus done and whatever, like a good old Western movie, you know how the cowboy comes in, saves the town, gets on his horse, tips his hat, and ride on off into the sunset.
There you go.
And then I'll sit back, I think, and reflect about what my role, my legacy might be in conjunction with this organization, if the good Lord blesses me to be able to do that.
That's amazing. My last question is going to be another 2-part question. I feel like I can never just give you one question, but there's been a lot of talk about expansion with Major League Baseball. And if there were to be expansion, it would be 2 teams. There's been, Portland has been discussed, and Montreal and Nashville and all these locations, Salt Lake City, whatever. If you could revive 2 Negro League baseball teams to be part of Major League Baseball expansion, what 2 teams would you choose based on the history and the uniform? They have the coolest uniform, so this would be great to see this team revived. And I guess the second part of the question is, has that ever, even in the most preliminary of preliminary discussions, has Major League Baseball ever reached out and been like, hey, we're thinking about expansion in the next 5 to 10 years. We're thinking maybe the Grays, we could bring back the Monarchs, something like that. Have they even kind of kicked the tires on something like that?
The Nats were that close. The Washington Nationals were that close to being called the Homestead Grays.
That would have been awesome.
And we came to Nationals instead. And that would have been tremendous. Of course, we are part of the group in Nashville, Music City Baseball, that is working very diligently to bring back the Nashville Stars. Now, they weren't a well-known Negro Leagues team, but their roots were there in Nashville. And this would essentially be the first time that a Major League team would have ever carried the name of a Negro Leagues team. And you talked about Nashville being one of those very, I think, realistic prospective cities, because we've been working behind the scenes for quite some time. We know that Major League Baseball is going to expand. It seems like every time we get to that point, something happens. COVID happened, a labor issue happened. I hope we don't have another labor issue, but it's starting to trend as if that could be a possibility. There's going to be an expansion at some point in time. I think the commissioner wants to see expansion, and I think he wants to try and do some things that will balance out geographically the league itself. And Nashville, I think, is a prime contender. The city itself is red hot. There is no question that Nashville would be a great city for expansion. And I like to speak these things into existence. When it happens, the team would be called the Nashville Stars, after the old Negro Leagues team. Okay. Now, if I was in a perfect world, you talk about the uniform, I don't know if anyone was ever any more stylish than our Kansas City Monarchs. J.L. Wilkinson had them in a different uniform almost every single year. Now, there are iconic uniforms in this game. I think the Homestead Grays uniforms are absolutely beautiful. The Detroit Stars uniforms were just magnificent. So if I was just imagining what this would be like, to see those teams revived would be incredible. But of course, you already have teams in those cities now. But, just playing the game along itself and what it would look like, it would be just magnificent. But I'm excited about the prospect of this team, the Nashville Stars, coming into existence, becoming into fruition, and the prospect that will have on this museum, as we continue to further grow. Because, we've created, with the recreation of the Indianapolis Clown, another professional baseball player. Another professional baseball team that is honoring the Negro Leagues in independent level baseball. The American Association Kansas City Monarchs are in existence in an independent baseball fashion. But yeah, to have the Nashville Stars come to fruition as a Major League team I can tell you now, that would be game-changing for Negro Leagues history and for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm rooting for it. At this point, I didn't have a dog in the fight for expansion, but now I want Nashville. Like, let's go. Let's get some baseball back in Nashville.
Let's go.
Mr. Bob Kendrick, it's always a pleasure when you join us on this show. It's we never get more feedback about a guest than when you join us. We usually get a ton of tweets from our listeners being like, when's he coming back? So that's up to you. I'm sure there will be an appearance number 4, but congratulations on qualifying for the dog calendar. And thank you so much.
I gotta go get a dog now.
Thank you again. It's always amazing talking to you.
Hey, man, thank you, guys. I appreciate the opportunity you all give me to be part of the show and share this history and all the great work that we're doing. I just want to tell everybody, if you want to learn more about the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum and specifically the campaign to build a new museum, log on to NLBM.com. The campaign is called Pitch for the Future. And you can go and learn more about what we're doing. And if you're so inclined, we would welcome you to join our effort by making a contribution to help us build Buck O'Neil a brand new house, which we are committed to doing.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. It's great to see y'all.